On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
What's in this episode, Mr. John?
Well, Hannes, today's episode sees the second and final part of our old friend Ronan Coghlan talking about mermaids, and there's a brief bit of Allison Jornlin talking about the rest of her project on paranormal women. But there's going to be more from Allison coming up very soon. So we've got a fun-packed show for you this time, and I sincerely hope that you all enjoy it.
I really like the old credits.
Well, we've got a new member of the Orang Pendek family to introduce today. This is my old chum, Amos Utterthwaite. Are you going to introduce yourself, Amos? I happen as I am. I'm Amos Utterthwaite, and I'm an Orang Pendek, and I don't come from the Indonesian island at Sumatra. I come from Batley in Yorkshire, in God's own country. The greatest county in England, bar none. White Rose forever. Now, I'm not like my nephews Rossiter and Ken. I don't live in Janey southern places like Brixton or blooming Lewisham or anywhere like that. I'll have nought to do with the south. I'm a good proper northerner. Anyway. We've fannied about for too long. Let's get this show on the road. I haven't got all day. I've got things to be doing. So roll VT.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of On the Track. My name's John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and this is Isabel, who is beating the living bees out of my back and shoulders because they hurt. And Isabel is a wonderful lady doing deep tissue massage. And welcome to another episode of On the Track. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that section of the show was far more complicated to record than I thought it was going to be, mainly because my producer Louis insisted that we have to cover up my nipples. I know that some people's nipples are very alluring to other people, but I very much doubt whether my nipples are alluring to anybody. But I do not want to be accused of being a pornographer, so it's covered up. And then once I covered them up with those two little stars, I couldn't find any tassels to put on the stars, which I wanted to. The addition of some sleazy organ music seems like a very good idea. But now let's get on with the show properly. For those of you who don't know, every Wednesday evening at 6:30 for about a quarter of an hour, and every Saturday afternoon at 3 for about twice that, we bring you a mélange of Fortean zoological stories about hard science, weird shit, and surreality. What's surreality? Well, I think the sequence of me having deep tissue massage to deal with my arthritis probably is surreal enough. But if you don't understand that, look at this. And now, before we disappear down any more peculiar rabbit holes, over to Ronan Coghlan for the second part of our discussion about merfolk.
In modern times, there have been a number of, incidentally, that was a modern time, according to my little book here. It was 1988. Now, you may think 1988 was a long time ago because you're one of these young fellows who thinks that anything before 2000 wasn't even in the book of Genesis. But this was in 1988. And
Well, I'm about 10 years younger than you. I'm not that young a fella.
You look very youthful today then on the screen.
Oh, that's just my boyish good looks.
Ah, yes. A lack of wrinkles, a lack of furrows, an unraddled brow. Now, I want also to go back to World War II. Now, that was before my time. And the experience of Robert Mellart. He was on the beach on an island that is now part of Indonesia. And he saw a crowd of natives gathered round and looking at something with interest. What are those natives up to, he said. Being a white man in the 1940s, you generally were suspicious that natives were up to skullduggery if they gathered in groups. Very prejudiced outlook. But when he got there, he claims he saw a mermaid lying there, a proper mermaid again, half human, half fish. She was an ugly creature, he said, with a long nose. However, she was writhing about, so he rushed off to get help. But when he came back, the mermaid was dead. We killed her, so the natives happily. We kill these things from time to time and we eat them. So I am afraid the mermaid probably ended up as a casserole or whatever they cook in Indonesia. In South Africa, there has been an outbreak of mermaid sightings. These mermaids are sometimes referred to as the cayman. They are not to be confused with the animal that's a cayman and is like a little crocodile and will bite your finger off if you poke it. These have been seen in the Zambezi, which would make them river mermaids. But the descriptions of them are of your traditional mermaid. Tail, human upper parts. Again, they seem to be mainly female. I haven't heard of any description of a merman from there. An unfortunate incident occurred on one occasion when one was seen by a man called Joseph Cupido. He saw the mermaid in the water and he thought she was in difficulties. He approached her, but then she held him with her eyes and he found himself being compulsively drawn towards her. He knew he was going towards her, but he also knew he could not control his bodily movements. And sheer horror enveloped him, as I'm sure you were thinking it would. Luckily, he had some friends nearby and he called out to them and they all rushed over and grabbed hold of him. And the mermaid's hypnotic stare then proved ineffectual and she sank beneath the waters. But the thing about these mermaids is the population along the Zambezi banks is black for the most part. But these mermaids are always seen as having white upper parts and hair that is more befitting to a Caucasian than a Negro. In other words, it's not kinky. I see you've got a cat behind you.
Yes.
Anyway.
The cat is making a noise and trying to disrupt the recording, but
I see. Well, she's sitting very tranquilly there now. A great credit to your cat training. Anyway, to get back to this, Cupido was saved, but the mermaids were described very much like the mermaids of Europe. They were white. Now, I think, bearing in mind that the local population was black, if they were tending to imagine mermaids for some reason or other, contagious hallucination or something, they would imagine black mermaids with hair like their own. They weren't.
Interrupting a moment, when you're talking about the hindquarters being like a fish,
Yes.
are they scaly? Do they have visible scales like a fish does?
Now, this is where I'm going to produce my theory. I noticed that in some cases they were described as having lower portions, not so much like a fish as like a dolphin or like a porpoise. They are supposed to have lower portions that could be mistaken for either of those. In other words, they look like mammals the whole way, not a combination of human and fish, but a combination of human and cetacean, I suppose you would say. This is a far less unlikely kind of creature than something that is half human, half fish. Now, there was, in the late 19th century, a writer, Sir Alexander Hardy, quite a naturalist, and he put forward the theory that when man evolved, he did part of it in the water. He evolved from pre-human creatures that evolved in the sea. You're familiar, I take it, with the existence of the illness Cyromelia, in which the legs of someone, he's born with them joined together. Now, that made me think as well. And it made me think that if there were humanoids that were dwelling in the sea, perhaps some of them branched off and evolved into creatures that were not equipped with a pair of legs, but instead were equipped with a tail that was a mammalian tail, but still very fish-like to the observer.
How does this tie in with the aquatic ape theory? It was
yes, the aquatic ape.
Somebody, and I can't remember her name.
Yes, I've got her name down in the book there, but I won't go searching for it just now.
Excellent.
She actually got her theory from Sir Alistair Hardy, who produced it originally, but it is the theory that a certain amount of human evolution goes back possibly to a pre-hominid that was in the water. Perhaps the whole human race is not descended from them, but some of them are. So she thought, and she adduces a great deal of evidence in favor of this. Because it's an unusual sort of theory, modern biologists tend to dismiss it out of hand. But I don't think you can dismiss something like that out of hand unless you get really strong evidence that it doesn't exist. Now, the other point is there is a problem with gills. I remember reading in one of these biological journals that underwater humans could not evolve because there are no gills in human DNA. I would say to that human DNA still contains many secrets, and that the idea that humans cannot develop gills is contradicted in the standard official folklore book on the mermaids by Benwell and Wall. You possibly have a copy of it there. Because in the final chapter of that, it is said by the authors that one of them knew a woman who was actually born with a full set of gills, and knew several others, or knew of several others rather, that had to have vestigial gills removed after birth. So it seems that the facts would indicate that there is some sort of hiccup in the they can't exist because of DNA argument. A final thing about the fishtails, on the coast of Scotland, where there is a wide belief in mermaids, they hold that the mermaids do not have tails. The tails are artificial coverings they use to enable them to swim more proficiently. Now, I am doubtful about this argument, but it would also get the thing about the human plus fish out of the way. Certainly you can swim with an artificial fishtail on, because there are professional mermaids in places like California who do it for public entertainment. Let us just journey to the Middle East for a moment. There, not very long ago at all, I shall have just found out the date. Oh yes, 2009. There was a mermaid seen off the coast of Israel, and it appeared for several days, and it cavorted when it saw it at a human audience. Photographs appeared on the internet. As far as I know, no one has proven this was a hoax or that this was the result of people hallucinating. It's very difficult to get a photograph of something you're hallucinating about. You need to do quite a lot of mental projection, I would think, before anything would appear. So I think, on the whole, the dolphin porpoise solution to mermaids is the most likely one. The mermaids, I fancy, would be a branch of the human race that has separated and evolved a new appendage. There is the capacity for human legs to knit together. This is shown by the unfortunate people who are subject to cyromelia, and therefore I think that is what probably lies behind the mermaids. However, if you want to read an assembled case of mermaid sightings, this elegant book will answer many of your questions. It can be purchased. Yes, that book?
That book looks fascinating. Who was it again who wrote it?
I did. Ronan Coghlan. No, I was going to say Bachelor of this parish, but as I have a wife and 3 children, that would be a misdirection, I think. Anyway.
So, from whence can it be purchased?
Well, obviously Amazon handles it, or the Book Depository, or ABE Books, on all the sort of websites that sell books, that sell good books, and possibly also on those that sell bad books. I don't know. But this elegant volume can certainly be purchased from any of them.
The thing that I've often wondered about mermaids is, back in another life, when I was a nurse about 40 years ago, one of the patients upon whom I did a case study had something called Lawrence Moon-Bidle syndrome, which gave her webbed hands and feet, like a frog.
Yes, this actually occurs quite a lot among people of former generations who didn't realize it was a syndrome at all. They put it down to having a merman or a mermaid as an ancestor somewhere. Webbed fingers are by no means uncommon in some places.
Because in a lot of Cornish folklore, for example, the Mermaid of Zena and the Mermaid of Senan Cove, the story is that if you see a mermaid, you must never approach her, because she will drag you down to your to her undersea kingdom and you'll be dead. And I've often wondered if somehow this is a cautionary tale.
Well, obviously, it's the kind of tale that children would be told to stop them getting too near dangerous waters. But it may also deal with, have something to do with the real creatures seen in the sea. I mean, Cornwall would be a grand place for them, and Cherry of Zennor actually has, as far as I remember, a bench dedicated to her in the local church.
Yes, and it's the only, as far as I know, it's the only pre-Civil War carving of a mermaid not to have been desecrated by Roundheads, from what I remember.
Yes.
I've known two people in my life who claim to have seen mermaids, both of them eminently sane, both of them now dead, sadly. But I don't think it had anything to do with seeing the mermaid that they died. They died 30 odd years ago. But these people, when they spoke to me, their accounts were as sober and sensible as if you were saying, I was interviewed by Jonathan Downes and he had an orange cat on his lap, you know.
Exactly, yes.
If it was something perfectly natural.
Well, the Isle of Man is another place you can look out for mermaids. The Mayoress of Peel and a crowd of hangers-on looking over at the edge of a cliff saw a mermaid and assured the audiences that they had done so. And Man has always been associated with mermaids. By man, I don't mean humanity, I mean the Isle of Man. There is even a story in Waldron's Folklore of the Isle of Man, published in the 18th century, that a diver was sent down in a diving bell, and he claimed to have seen a lot of mermaids down there in a mermaid city. Now, I don't think he actually saw a mermaid city. I think oxygen starvation probably had something to do with the sighting. But the fact of the matter is that the Isle of Man is certainly regarded as a place where mermaids hang out. You don't tend to hear of mermen so often, but accounts of mermen do occur. Perhaps they're more shy than mermaids. They don't tend to get up on rocks and comb their hair and sing like the Little Mermaid. So that may be why they are reported rather less frequently. But again, these mermen are supposed to have the fishy nether parts.
Wasn't there a series of sightings relatively recently in the Caspian Sea?
Yes. Now, the creature in the Caspian Sea does not conform to general descriptions of mermaids or mermen. They've said it was a male creature, though they don't seem to be terribly sure. What happened was a ship from Azerbaijan was going up the Caspian Sea. You can't get very far up there, it's only a lake. And looking over, they saw this creature down below, which looked vaguely humanoid. It didn't look at all like the usual description of mermaids. And looking over, the captain attested that this creature was down there. What exactly it was, they haven't seen it close up enough to identify. They think it may have been living in an unfrequented part of the Caspian Sea and moved out due to volcanic activity on the sea floor, or the lake bed, or whatever you like to call it. But that thing, it is called the Ronan Shah, the Water King, in the Persian language. Persians like to call their language Farsi these days. But it certainly was attested. But what it is still in the uncertain variety of things.
And that's about it for that discussion, because as often happens, Ronan and I then drifted off down plenty of different rabbit holes and just carried on chatting for ages. No doubt we shall have Ronan back very soon in the future, and no doubt we shall return to the subject of aquatic humanoids at some time when the stars are right. But now, those of you with long enough memories to remember last week's episode will remember that we had Allison Jornlin on. And she, when we were talking to her, actually had two different subjects to talk about. We'll be back next week with her second subject, which is talking about fairies and the fae folk. But in the meantime, here is a very short conclusion to her talking about her project about women in paranormal research. And of course there's Katie, but you already know Katie, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, we had talked a few months back about Linda Godfrey, who was my great friend, and she and we were talking about Alexander David Neal and how she transcended. I think Linda Godfrey also transcended with her research into the Bray Road Beast, and just really she became a big name in cryptozoology, unlike a lot of the other women who have put in a lot of hard work. But I think she was able to transcend, and I'm going to really miss her, but I'm sure the field will miss her as well.
How did you meet her in the first place?
Well, we both live in Wisconsin, and so we're both weirdos. So we have a mutual friend here in Milwaukee, where I live, and she didn't live too far away from us. Maybe about 45 minutes or so, and so she would invite us to go hiking with her in the Kettle Moraine Forest, and I was able to have a sleepover with her one time, which was really a great girls' night, and we went to conferences together, and shared hotel rooms and speaking engagements, and she was a great friend. So, and she really took me under her wing, and I really miss her.
Yes, I think we all do, but not as much as you do, but because of your personal connection. But I was very, very sad to hear when she died.
Yeah, well, she just really was an incredibly kind person. Uh, when there was, I mean, she didn't need to be, but that was just Linda, just so giving and helpful to a fault. I mean, she was there for people. Um, yeah, she's gonna be greatly missed.
So what else are you working on at the moment?
Well, other than my YouTube channel, Paranormal Women, which again people can find if you go to YouTube and you just type in Paranormal Women without quotes, you're not going to find it. But if you put quotes around it in the search bar, you'll find it. Or you can just go to youtube.com/paranormal women, and I'd really appreciate your subscription. The more subscriptions we get, the more power that I have to get the word out. So I'd really appreciate subscriptions.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page, and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, wants me to remind you, always press the notification bell, or else you won't be told when the next show's going to be.
And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it?
And so, ladies and gentlemen, here we are once again at the end of another show. I'd like to say a big thank you to my guests this week, who were Allison Jornlin, Richard Freeman and Ronan Coghlan. And I also want to say a big thank you to my producer Louis and to my old friend, Deputy Director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology and carer, which means he's the guy who pushes me in my wheelchair round and round the labyrinthine corridors of North Devon District Hospital more often than I like to think about, Graham Inglis, who at the moment is somewhere between Arizona and Oregon, and he's just having fun visiting friends in the United States. He'll be back sometime in the second week in June, and in the meantime Richard's looking after me, so thank you to both of you. And a big thank you to Miss Karen, my secretary, and to Miss Judy, my long-suffering housekeeper, but for whom this place would end up being a complete and utter bugger's muddle of rubbish, whereas actually it looks really quite civilized and respectable these days. I'll be back on Wednesday. What am I going to be talking about on Wednesday? I'm not sure, but it's almost certainly going to be a book review with the boy Freeman. And I'll be back on Saturday. And on Saturday we are going to bring you Allison Jornlin talking about the wee folk. And no, that's got nothing to do with the specialised nightclub that one of our colleagues told us about. And it'll be at Wednesday, on Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock. And so, if you guys are going to be there to watch me, I'll be seeing you